Know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We're back! Hi! Welcome back with Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your nap time, downtime, max relaxing, chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, skiing time, summertime, break time, in between time, study time, CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. And we are back with the remarkable journey of Prince Jen. And the last time we were here, Prince Jen had helped a scholar named Master Fu, who is asking for a lot of favors. He's asking for a lot of strenuous help and causing a lot of unnecessary stress to the prince as well as his servants. And he's trying his best to practice compassion and patience, but we're going to see how far that goes. Chapter 4. The Yamen of Chawei. Voyaging moon solves one problem. Another rises. I suggest the following, Ma Fu said. I take one of Master Fu's ankles, you take the other, then we turn him upside down and stick his miserable head in this mud as deep as we can. How'll that move the carriage? Prince Jen said. It won't, Ma Fu said, but it will cheer me up considerably. Why blame him? Prince Jen said, bidding all his strength against the sunken wheel. None of this is his fault. Isn't it? Ma Fu retorted. If it hadn't fallen into the river, you wouldn't have pulled him out. If you hadn't pulled him out, he wouldn't have begged to ride. If he hadn't begged to ride, we wouldn't have gone out of our way. And if we hadn't gone out of our way, we wouldn't be wallowing in muck up to our ears. Prince Jen gritted his teeth. Contrary to the instructions of Master Hugh concerning respect for the elderly and the 87 acts of kindness, at this moment he would have been delighted to follow Ma Fu's suggestion. His fingers itched to seize Master Fu not by the ankles, but by the exasperating wretched's skinny neck. Instead, he flung himself against the wheel and strained and heaved beside Ma Fu. The carriage moved, rolled back a little, and finally lurched free. Ma Fu's shout of triumph turned to a groan of dismay. We're no better off, he cried. Look here, half the spokes are cracked. The wheel won't move. Hands on hips, he glumly regarded the disabled vehicle. We have two choices. We can unhitch both horses and ride back to the main road. Or I take one horse and you stay in the carriage and wait until Li Kuang sends help. What is the difficulty? Master Fu had climbed onto the back seat, where he had been observing with great interest the efforts of Prince Jen and Ma Fu. The wheel will hold for a little distance. In Quanzhou, it can be repaired while you find shelter. Only a few moments more. Prince Jen hesitated. As the rain pelted down, apart from throttling Master Fu, the one thing he most wished for was a roof over his head. Wet and exhausted, he would have been grateful for the roughest comfort. I almost said roughest sleep, roughest comfort. There we go. One instant longer than those few moments, he said, and we will have a huge account to settle with me. Allow me to disagree, Ma Fu said. I'll be the one to settle his account. Ma Fu, for once, proved accurate in his claims. The wheel wobbled but did not break. As twilight gathered, Prince Jen saw lights glowing ahead, sooner even than Master Fu promised. An added relief, the downpour stopped as quickly as it had begun. Entering the village of Quanzhou, Ma Fu trotted the horse across a little public square, its ground dry and hard-packed as if there had never been a rainstorm. He had no need to ask the location of the yamen. The headquarters of the local official was the biggest building in Quanzhou, surrounded by high walls. The only entrance, an iron gate. The watchman's jaw dropped in astonishment when Ma Fu announced the arrival of the young Lord Prince. He hurried to fling open the gate and call for attendants to receive the royal visitor. Within moments, a handful of bewildered servants came scrambling out, stunned and mystified by Jin's presence in the village. Ma Fu drove the carriage into the courtyard. Stepping down, Prince Jin glanced over his shoulder. He saw nothing of the old scholar. Master Fu, for reasons of his own, must have clambered for the other side of the vehicle and scurried off into one of the alleys. Prince Jen heaved a thankful sigh, not in any way unhappy over Master Fu's disappearance without a word of gratitude. The village administrator now came forward. Chow Hui, by name, the official of the third rank looked as mystified as his servants. Young Lord Prince, what a joyful surprise! Chow Wei bowed and made every effort to twist his long-jawed face into an expression of pleasure. Still more amazing, you are unharmed. Ferocious bandits, the Yellow Scarves, have been attacking all travelers in these parts. How did you escape such danger? I saw no bandits, Jin replied. The only dangers were being soaked to the skin by the rainstorm and my carriage foundering in the mud. A wheel is damaged. Have it repaired. Meantime, I and my servant will change into dry clothing. Yes, yes, young lord, as you command. Only forgive me for not offering hospitality at once. Cha Wei wrung his hands and blinked his close-set eyes. My astonishment, my relief at your safety, made me forget proper courtesy. Alas, this wretched yamen is ill-prepared to offer a fitting welcome. Even so, I beg you to avail yourself of my humble and most unworthy facilities. They will be sufficient for our needs, Prince Jen replied. See to my carriage immediately. I wish to leave as soon as possible. Your visitation will be short. I am filled with unbearable, painful regret, returned Cha Wei, brightening. He clapped his hands, ordering attendants to conduct Prince Jen and Mafu to the best available chambers. Hardly the celestial palace, observed Mafu after servants had brought fresh robes, but not too bad for the provinces. I guess that Cha Wei treats himself well enough. What official doesn't? Mafu was correct. As Prince Jin discovered when they were led to Cha Wei's private apartments, their tables had been spread with quite acceptable refreshments. In addition, Cha Wei had summoned his household musicians. With the melodies of zither and flute, the chiming of bells, the tuneful sounds mixing with incense from iron braziers, Prince Jin felt reasonably at ease for the first time in a trying day. He briefly explained the events that had brought him to the village. Cha Wei gave him a puzzled look. How interesting that your lordship mentions a downpour. Hardly localized atmospheric disturbances, of course, are not impossible. Nevertheless, here we have not had a drop of rain for 5 days. You saw our clothing, Jin curtly replied, wet and muddy. Honorable Cha Wei, I know when I've been rained on. Cha Wei tactfully let the matter drop and begged his royal guest to speak more of the purpose of his journey. Prince Jin's fatigue, however, must have weighed on him more heavily than he realized, for he found his thoughts drifting away, floating with the music, soaring with the shimmering tones of the flute. Only when Mafu nudged him did he abruptly raise his head and open his eyes. Whatever your lordship requires, Cha Wei was saying. Oh, yes, Prince Jin blinked. He had, for the moment, been happily elsewhere. The voice of the flute had led him spinning like a leaf in a silver stream, past waterfalls that turned into rainbows, and rainbows that turned into bright-plumaged birds. Cha Wei's yamen was a dull, boring place in comparison. What his lordship requires, put in Mafu helpfully, seeing his master looked away absently, is an armed escort. With dangerous bandits in the vicinity, the young lord must not travel unguarded. Mafu is right, Prince Jen said. Yes, we wish an escort. Assemble them. Have them ready with their weapons. 12 mounted men should suffice. It should, if only I had them to offer, Cha Wei replied. Lord Prince, I beg your gracious indulgence. There is not one able-bodied man in Quanzhou. They are all in the countryside seeking to capture the bandits. The young lord must have a suitable escort. Nonetheless, Mafu said, lacking anyone else that leaves yourself and your attendants. That would be an honor beyond what I deserve, replied Cha Wei. My servants, mere cooks, clerks, and low-ranking deputies and their assistants, are entirely unworthy of such a noble task. Then, demanded Mafu, what do you suggest? Ah, yes, what I suggest, Cha Wei answered, is another joyful possibility. Cha Wei looked as if he had been swallowed a bowl of scalding tea as he continued. I urge his lordship to accept my hospitality, wretched and despicable though it is, for a week, 10 days perhaps, until the village men return. I cannot be delayed that long, said Prince Jen. Out of the question, agreed Mafu. There's nothing else for it, he added, as Cha Wei's features grew more and more pained. You and your servants will have to do, so put on your armor if you have any. You'll need swords, lances, bows, and arrows. What bliss, Chawei murmured in a strangled voice, to die in the service of Prince Jen, the young lord. If his lordship permits me to address him, I know a better way. These words came from one of the musicians. If his lordship permits me to address him, I know a better way. These words came from one of the musicians, a girl who set aside her flute and came forward to approach Prince Jen. Forgive such impertinence, Chawei hastily put in. This pitiful creature is Voyaging Moon, a bondmaid who has shown some small ability in music. I have taken a slight degree of benign interest in her well-being. Ignorant, ill-favored though she is, her thoughts might conceivably be of value. Your lordship may deign to favor her by listening to them. Let her speak, said Prince Jen. Until now he had taken little notice of the individual musicians. The flute girl, however, had caught his full attention. Compared with the noble ladies in the celestial palace, Voyaging Moon could hardly count as beautiful. Far from an oval perfection, her face had the sharp high cheekbones of an eastern province peasants. Instead of being arranged in a lankered tower, the girl's black hair hung loose over her shoulders and was held only by a white headband. He motioned for her to continue. An armed escort might offer some protection, Voyaging Moon said in a voice that Jen found as melodious as her instrument. At the same time, it would attract unwanted attention. These bandits will stop at nothing. Their leader calls himself Natha, Yellow Scarf. He's worse than the rest of them put together. He'd be more than happy to cut your throat, so the best thing would be to go quickly, quietly, and not be seen at all. Exactly as I was about to say, exclaimed Chawei. Much as I yearned to give my life defending the young lord, I reluctantly admit that her idea was, and has, merit. In other words, I'm to travel secretly? Furtively? Said Prince Jen. Do you think it honorable for me to skulk like a coward through my own kingdom? I'd have supposed that skulking was part of a princely education, Voyaging Moon said. Certainly not, retorted Jen. Then here's a chance to learn, said Voyaging Moon. She's right, Mafu whispered. Better to be unnoticed than dead. A little skulking never harmed anyone. I was born and raised in this district, the girl continued. I know pathways that will keep you clear of Natha and his gang. They will never know and catch a glimpse of you. Now I can see your lordship's about to suggest me taking me as a guide, a brilliant idea for my ignoble self. It will be an honor of a lifetime enshrined forever in my memory. Naturally, my esteemed master would have to agree to do without my worthless presence for a short time. Oh, I agree, burst out Chawei. Yes, well then, Jin began. The girl was looking straight at him. She used all the proper terms of self-deprecation, but he had the uneasy feeling she meant not a word of them. Now that you have suggested, or I was going to suggest, he stammered, your presence with us would be a pleasure. That is, useful. Very acceptable. Chawei, sighing with happy relief, eagerly offered to provide a horse on which the flute girl could return to the village. It was decided that all would be ready by daybreak, and Prince Jen and Mafu were again installed in their sleeping chamber. About that flute girl, Jen said as he stretched on the couch. I'm glad for her help, but did you find her somehow irreverent? Impertinent, even? No more than I am, Mafu yawned. You'll manage to put up with her. Prince Jen did not reply and soon fell asleep, but the voice of the flute echoed in his ears. The features of the girl filled his dreams. He awoke feeling vaguely unsettled and too distracted to observe and properly admire the rising sun. The artisans had repaired the wheel. The girl in coarse cotton trousers and jacket waited at the carriage. Because of her knowledge of the countryside, Mafu allowed her to take the reins. Chawei at the yamen gate did his best to look heartbroken by the early departure of his royal guest. Prince Jen would gladly have conversed with the flute girl, but each time he tried, he grew strangely tongue-tied. At last he gave up his attempts. His glances, nevertheless, continually went to Voyaging Moon. For her part, the girl was as good as her word. She followed practically invisible paths and trails, driving quickly and efficiently. Prince Jen, in fact, felt a twinge of regret at reaching the road so soon. His regret turned to alarm when Voyaging Moon drew up at the spot where he had left his escort. He sprang from the carriage, looking in every direction. He saw nothing of Li Kuang or a single one of his men. The road lay empty. Has our hero begun to develop some affection for the flute girl? A more urgent question. What has become of Li Kuang and his warriors? The answer is given in the next chapter. And that is where we will end for today. I thank you all so very much for tuning in. I love you all very, very much. Please enjoy my favorite day of the week, Wednesday. Odin's Day, Wednesday, for the Winnie the Pooh fans. I love you all. Be good to each other. Bye-bye.